Welcome back to the CBIA BizCast powered by Google. I'm Amanda Marlowe. The 2026 legislative session is now in the past. So who better to talk about everything that happened this year than the Vice President of Public Policy, Chris Davis. Chris, welcome back to the BizCast.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Let's break down everything, that happened this session. Generally speaking, what is the sentiment coming out from the business community?
Well, it was really a mixed results, which, I know we've said in the past, but this year it's really poignant, that mixed results. It's like we took one step forward in many policy areas, but then like 3 steps backwards that could really have a lasting impact on the business community for many years to come based off of some of the decisions that were intentionally made this session by legislators.
So a lot of this happened, but.
Exactly.
So let's kind of talk about some of those positives. I guess starting with one of CBIA's policy priorities for several years now has been to expand the R&D tax credit. Tell me what happened with that this session.
Well, it really started before the session, having conversations with both the governor's office and legislative leadership about ways that we can have a real lasting impact on expanding the economy here in Connecticut. And one of those ways that we've been talking about for years and has really been kind of just left on the shelf by policymakers was expanding the R&D tax credit to pass-through entities. So allowing these smaller businesses to have a level playing field with their competitors that are larger and have access to these tax credits to help offset some of those costs and those investments to grow jobs, grow innovation, and really find greater productivity here in the state. So it's a great opportunity for us as Connecticut to be able to really target those largely manufacturers, but other industries qualify for the tax credit as well, to say, make those investments here in Connecticut, grow your economy here in Connecticut by adding jobs here in our state.
Now, at the same time, there was some steps back, sort of, that would impact the same group of manufacturers based on things that had happened at the federal level.
Yeah. So, we did this R&D tax credit, great, sending a message, invest here in Connecticut. But then as a state, in the state budget, we decided to decouple from some of the positive benefits of the federal tax changes that happened earlier or, last July. One in particular that has a direct impact on what the positive that we got out of the R&D tax credit was a change to the immediate expensing for qualified production facilities, which means manufacturers that make investments here in Connecticut to grow, perhaps may take advantage of the R&D tax credit. Under the federal code, they can immediately expense that expansion project on their facility, or if they relocated a facility here, they can immediately expense it. Under Connecticut's tax code, we followed that and we said, you can as well. Well, now with this budget, they pulled that back and they said, no, we're going to go back to the old way, which is a 39-year depreciation schedule. So yes, you still get the benefit of the depreciation, but it's under a much longer time period and doesn't have as much of a meaningful impact as it would if we could immediately expense it.
So, between those two things, had we not decoupled but still passed the R&D, it would have been such a great place, to say, hey, come here, invest in Connecticut. But now we've taken a little bit of a step back.
It would have made us a positive outlier in the region. A lot of our neighboring states have started to decouple from some of those positive tax benefits in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And Connecticut had the opportunity to keep it on the books and say, not only are we doubling down with an R&D tax credit expansion, but we're also encouraging you to do it here in Connecticut by expanding your facilities, maybe relocating facilities from other states here. And now, yes, you can still depreciate it, but under a much longer timetable. So it really puts us back in the same spot that we were as a competitiveness level with our neighboring states, which really, at the end of the day, puts us at a disadvantage because of all of our additional costs.
I want to talk about another positive. So, what we've seen over the past couple of years our CBI's policy team working with DEEP had really made some advancements in, the regulatory environment, but also the process of interacting with the state. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, a couple of years ago, when our CBIA Foundation put out their Opportunity Connecticut Action Plan for the state, some major areas of reform were needed in permitting and access to be able to have greater opportunities within state programming, state grants. So this year we saw progress again, based off of what we learned in that report and what we were able to bring to the legislature and to the executive branches and say, here's ways that we can make it easier to do business here in the state of Connecticut. And one of those ways was permitting reform with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. We hear often that it's a real challenge and a real long timeline to get projects done here in the state, in part because of the structure of our permitting. So what we were able to get passed this year, working with the department, was a reform that allows for general permits. So now you no longer have to get a whole series of different permits that have different timelines and different requirements that the commissioner and the department can decide, well, we're going to give you a general permit to move forward with this project as long as you meet these certain guidelines. This should speed up the process, something that we've been recommending for a number of years now. And we think it's going to have a great opportunity for businesses to really grow based off of the ability to have permits done much faster.
Why do you think CBI has been so successful in working with DEEP on some of these permitting reforms? I mean, these are real big steps that, haven't been able to get across before. What has been so successful about that relationship?
Well, it's coming off of the success that we had last year with the Transfer Act
so over
becoming,
over the last few years.
Yes, yeah, and it's really been an opportunity for us to work closely with leadership at DEEP with the governor's office and the directives coming from them to work with us as well. And then us just building that relationship over a time period. And that's what we do here at CBIA. Our goal is to always have those relationships with policymakers, whether it be in the executive branch or the legislative branch. And it takes a lot of effort. We have to coordinate with our legislators that are on the important committees that oversee these departments. We have to work with the executive branch actors and bring them all together and say, listen, this is what we really need as a business community to advance that. And that's what we've been so successful doing the last couple of years here at CBIA.
And, staying on that topic of regulatory reform, but also streamlining processes within state government and providing more resources, talked a little bit about the small business concierge.
So one thing that we've heard for years is that small businesses in particular don't know where to start when it comes to reaching out to the state, finding out what permits they need, what kind of grants could be available, what kind of workforce development programs could be available. And over at the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, they actually introduced what's known as a concierge service, where they have a team there that will answer the phone, say, okay, you want to do this project, here's the types of permits, we'll help you walk you through that process. So we said, well, let's replicate that with the other agencies that have direct contact with our business community. So Department of Economic and Community Development was the obvious next choice, and they've worked with us this session on developing a bill that ultimately got passed in the final days of the session that will create a position within DECD to be this kind of concierge service, especially for small businesses, to have that one stop where they can call and say, I want to get this kind of a permit. This is the type of business that I want to operate. What are some of the grant opportunities? What are the workforce opportunities? Those types of things that they would be able to help usher them through that process and provide that guidance that has been needed for so many years, with that kind of open front door for business instead of finding those closed doors throughout all the different agencies.
Was there anything on the energy front? We heard a lot about that talk the past two sessions. Any baby steps even made?
Well, on the energy side, we had a priority bill from the Senate Democrats where it's going to take one of our policy solution agenda items, which was cutting the sales tax for especially small businesses for their energy costs, which would have been an immediate savings on their energy bill. Unfortunately, they didn't move forward with that bill. And that was really a disappointment this session, as it was something that, gained a lot of steam, a lot of support, and was seen as a priority to kind of be left on the table is a bit disappointing. And to that, there really wasn't much in the energy space, even though that's one of the leading cost drivers. Our CBIA survey shows every year that that's one of the increasing cost drivers for businesses here in the state and residents as well. And yet there was very little done to address the energy costs here in Connecticut.
Moving over to workforce, I know this is a loaded question. We did have, for our listeners, feel free to go back to our last episode. We had a great conversation with Paul Amarone about this, big aircraft carrier workforce bill. But tell us a little bit about some of the positives, that came out of session workforce.
I think workforce is a great example of that one step forward, three steps back that we had this session, because, even within that big omnibus labor bill that, dealt with a lot of issues that actually are going to be pain points for businesses, where there are more burdens, more regulations, more costs.
And we'll certainly get into those.
Yeah, there were some positives that did come out of it, which really centered around trying to build up our workforce pipeline here in the state. So one big example of that is a recommendation from our recently released workforce report from our CBIA Foundation, which called for regional navigators so that we can connect students with businesses in their regions and be able to have that greater connection between the school districts, the students themselves, and the businesses, so that we can have greater pipeline programs developed within those specific regions to meet those regional demands. So those positions were not only just created, but they were also funded in the state budget as well. So we're going to have an opportunity to have those individuals put into place to help navigate those students to find the best career pathways, and also work with our member businesses to be able to help tap into that resources within their local school districts.
There's also support for teachers who want to go back and kind of learn more about what is happening in these industries that maybe they left decades ago.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for them to take advantage of externships, and what the bill did, it was set up pathways for that opportunity for teachers as well, so that they can get that hands-on experience and learn directly from professionals within those trades. And additionally, they set up a working group to develop ways for us to have those professionals actually come into the classrooms and teach with them as well. Be able to have those career and technical education expansion part of our policy solutions agenda this year.
And one of the most troubling parts of that bill was the wage theft. I know, again, we spoke about this at length in our last episode, so please go back and listen. But if you can tell us a little bit, about what happened there. Yeah,
it's a major shift in how liability for wages are done here in the state. And yes, it concentrates on general contractors and their subcontractors, but it sends a message across the board to all industries that the work of people below you may end up having a greater impact on you as you look at contracting and things like that. So we're fearful that that's going to open the door, that if you have general liability on both the general contractor to make sure that the subcontractors pay the wages to their employees. And of course, we want to, anybody who isn't, we want to make sure that they're held accountable. But the solution that was developed to force the general contractors to take on that liability is not good. And it sends a message across all industries that this is something that is not just something that's addressed contractually between parties, between businesses, but now potentially the state government could step in between there too.
So let's shift a little bit to this conversation about AI. It was a hot topic going into session. It's going to continue to be one, that comes out. But there were some troubling areas, that lawmakers tried to dig into here.
Yeah, the last couple of years, Connecticut has been kind of at the forefront of comprehensive artificial intelligence legislation, really a state-specific approach that makes Connecticut an outlier across the country. At the same time, we saw Colorado pass a bill, was not good. They've had to hold off on it and rework it multiple times. So it really was an opportunity for Connecticut to kind of put the brakes on that and say, maybe that's not the approach that should be taken. Unfortunately, this session, we started inching closer and closer to that by not quite a full comprehensive bill, but one that was targeted to specific uses of AI that at the end of the day creates a patchwork across the country that then either can be modeled in other states or is copying other states that then almost takes that comprehensive approach. It's been a real trouble for the business community.
A number of those AI kind of related bills and language, we also have more information on CBIA's website. But let's talk a little bit now about the state budget. Lawmakers have been talking a lot about fiscal guardrails in the past couple of years. This year, we may have opened up a bit of a can of worms.
Yeah, well, most years we're talking about tax increases, right? And thankfully, we didn't have that this year. Largely, it was not something that was on the radar for people because surplus revenues were coming in. But unfortunately, the spending has kind of gotten out of control. In fact, if they didn't make adjustments this year to those fiscal guardrails, we'd be in deficit because the spending has really climbed over the last few years to outspend, what the budget was adopted. So this year was budget adjustments. They were adjusting the budget that they did last year, but in doing so, they increased spending by over $1 billion. They moved over $1 billion worth of spending off of the budget as well, so that it no longer falls under the spending cap. And then they actually made an adjustment to the spending cap and increased it so that they can spend even more money. And that spending cap has really been what's held everything together over the last several years, put that real check on. And now they have enough votes within the legislature and an emergency declaration from the governor to spend more than that spending cap and reset that. So this is really troublesome for the future because as that cap gets raised, that means more and more revenue is going to be needed, which could lead to future tax increases, especially if we see a little dip in the economy and some of those receipts don't come in as strong as we predicted.
Yeah, because a lot of this was one-time spending, going to cities and towns, but it's one time for now.
Well, as history has shown, a lot of these one-time spending opportunities end up being lasting impacts, right? And we saw this during COVID, where there was this infusion from the federal government and all these funds went out the door, especially to local municipalities, and we're told, like, use these on one-time expenses. They came knocking for more money after that, saying, oh, well, these expenses really need to be continued into the future. So by raising the cap this year, adjusting the volatility cap by hundreds of millions of dollars so they can fuel that additional spending, that will lead to higher demands for services, higher demands for costs in the future, which will ultimately lead to most likely higher taxes in the near future.
It's a false sense of security almost for cities and towns.
Well, they're finding their funding now that will address some of the concerns that they have, but that funding is supposed to run out, right? And then what do they do from there? And property taxes continue to be a very difficult conversation and a puzzle to solve for the state of Connecticut. And this will only cause even more issues with that because that state funding is scheduled to run out, and then the municipalities will have to find a way to continue to provide those services in the future.
And that affordability is a buzzword, right? We've been hearing about constantly, and so many lawmakers walked into session saying, we're going to make Connecticut more affordable. This is our top priority. Were they effective?
Well, the affordability was supposed to be the main focus of the session. All four caucuses, both parties talked about this as their main focus. However, two of the main things that deal with affordability, energy and healthcare, were not really addressed. As far as healthcare goes, we had the opportunity to pass association health plans again and made it out of committee, made it to the appropriations committee, ultimately got voted down there. A way for us to offer low-cost, high-quality care for especially small businesses across the state and their employees, most importantly. And unfortunately, they left that solution on the table yet again and did very little to address healthcare outside of a small tax credit that's available to small businesses that offer ICRA programs for their employees. And as far as energy goes, there was very little done in that respect to help lower the cost for both residents and businesses. So we're not able to say that this year really addressed affordability because it didn't. And it's unfortunate because that was really the buzzword, and what people were looking forward to having happen this session was addressing the high costs of living here in Connecticut, doing business here in Connecticut. And unfortunately, the affordability session did not live up to its moniker.
And some of that maybe had to be with it being an election year, right? And bills at the end, bringing in a number of other bills. Do I get this across the finish line because this has been my priority for 5 years and I'm being elected now this year? What is next? What happens now?
Well, we saw policymakers in both parties, quite frankly, choose electoral politics over good policy time and time again this session, which is really why we took that one step forward and 3 steps back. So now moving forward, they're moving into an election season. Every member of the legislature is up for re-election. The governor is up for re-election this year. So we at CBIA will be doing our voting scorecard in the coming weeks so that all of our members and the general public can see how each one of these individual legislators voted on these particular topics throughout the session and make decisions based off of that about who they want to support in the upcoming election.
Thanks so much, Chris, for being with us here today. For more information about any of the bills we discuss, head on over to CBIA.com. Now, to kick off the month of May, we always celebrate the small businesses here in Connecticut with National Small Business Week in partnership with the SBA Connecticut District Office. We had a number of awardees who shared their stories at an awards ceremony with CBIA earlier this month. Take a listen to their stories.
While I'm receiving this award, truly, I want to, hands down, full credit goes to my team at Naval Aero. They come to work, show up to work every day with dedication, hard work, and a willingness to improve their process. Continuous improvement, while it's rewarding and exciting, but it's not easy for those who haven't experienced it for the first time. It's difficult. And because the reason for that is it operates on the fundamental principle of change. And change is not easy. Many of us, even if it's for good. But my team took upon the challenge, and they learned, adapted, and embraced change.
This is our 80th anniversary. This year, the company was founded in 1946. There's been a lot of water under that bridge in Cheshire, Connecticut, and then I set everybody down about 5 or 6 years ago and said, guys, our average age has dropped into the 30s. You're going to be great one day, but it's not today. It's probably 5, 6 years from now before you're going to be unstoppable. And as I said the other week, when they looked out at my young staff and said, that day has arrived, because we just won the coveted award as Manufacturer of the Year. I didn't win it. They won it. I just gave them a platform to perform. And they come to work and they do it every day. And when I listen to the entrepreneurs talk, and we talked about where do you go for things and what do you do and who do you talk to, one of our core values at our company is collaboration. That's how we got here today, was that work and that collaboration and all the help. There's at least 30 people in this room that I've leaned on at some point in my career that have helped me.
The end of 2024, I had got laid off. And I knew, okay, this is my opportunity to go full entrepreneur mode. But I say that to say this, that you definitely, it's gonna come a time where you gotta bet on yourself and bet on yourself big. And that was my time. Like I was definitely prepared and ready and had the business plan and went after it. But it was definitely a hard time to try to figure out. But I know, like with my faith and tenacity and grit and hustle, that it was possible.
When I started to think I was going to retire 10 years ago, I discussed it with my wife, and I was putting 47 years of marriage on the line there, saying, "How about if I'm home all the time?" She said something like, "Couldn't you find a part-time job somewhere?" That part-time job turned into be a full-time job, and as mentioned, 9 years later, I purchased the Shea Group. We're a company of human resource consulting. We help not only individuals, but companies that are looking for assistance with anything that looks and sounds and acts like human resources. We help people in transition, and we're glad to be able to be there to assist folks when they need help in a very dark time in their life. They've lost their job, they need a new job, they have requirements with kids and families, they need insurance. We step in and help them get ready for that next job so they can, in fact, progress to that next opportunity and gain that respect and dignity that seems to be taken away when we all lose our jobs. It's happened to me 3 times in my career, so I can not only empathize, but I can totally sympathize with what people are going through when they've lost their job. It's not an easy time, but we're there to help them.
Thank you all. I tell our clients all the time that concise and to the point is the best messaging, so I'm going to try my best to do that. As I said, I came here 4 years ago with this vision for what could be here in Hartford and in Connecticut, but it really would not have worked if I didn't have the support and so many people that bought into that. So first of all the incredible local businesses and organizations that heard our story, heard what we were offering and said, hey, we want to work with you, because that was such a key piece of this. Also, as an entrepreneur, and for the other entrepreneurs in the room, I'm sure you know this, a key piece of it is having a really supporting family and fiance who, when hours are late, are very accommodating. So I'm very appreciative to them. And then, of course, the team has been a huge piece of this. The advice that I got that I forgot to mention earlier that was hugely important was build a great team around you. And as a young entrepreneur figuring a lot of stuff out, I think that having a team that not only brings their own expertise and their own guidance, but also is understanding that sometimes you are going to make mistakes, and that's how you grow as a team, has been hugely beneficial. And so I'm so grateful to our team that has helped us grow over the last 4 years, and looking forward to the next 4 years. So thank you all so much.
I always marvel every day when somebody walks in our door. They don't have to. They could sit on their couch and click. And so we really, really lean into and appreciate everybody that comes in. I never aspired to be Woman-Owned Business of the Year. I just want to be best in class. And however, being a woman-owned business, if it inspires another woman to take the step in the right direction, I got you. So if you want to reach out, please do. Our business, our team, mediocrity is never an option. We don't live in that space. We live in best-in-class service, and we service everybody that walks in our door, and that is what is truly going to keep us a brick and mortar for many years to come. So thank you to all of you, and I appreciate it.
The stories you guys have all told are similar to myself and our team. We work hard. We've worked through ups and downs. We've had some days where we weren't sure back in a few years back where we really had to work hard to make this work. But our company reviews environmental reports for banks, many of the banks here. CIC actually was our first SBA client nationally, and then Pursuit, which is also represented here, started there, and now we work all over the country with banks all over the country, helping small businesses get their loans. And we started to realize this about 8 or 9 years ago that when we started to do these approvals, and they're not always easy, getting their approvals, we are inspiring, we are helping the American dream. And it's really cool when you break it down into those pieces. But as an owner, as a business person, all the things I've heard today have been so meaningful because we've all seen it in different parts of the journey, and it's really important to keep driving. One of the things that's made us successful is that we're an environmental company. I'm an environmental engineer. I think it's cool. Not everyone always thinks it's the coolest thing in the world. We've jumped into the industries that we work in. I go to SBA conferences, not environmental conferences, but SBA conferences, because I've gotten to know the people that make the decisions there, and they help us introduce us to their folks. I've been coming to this for years. I mean, I drive these guys crazy because I usually register at the last minute. I come because I want to see all the lenders. I want to see the people that we work with. And honestly, it's just inspiring every year. And to be up here right now, it's a huge honor.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's BizCast. Give us your feedback and let us know if there are any guests you'd like to hear from by emailing us at bizcast@cbia.com. And remember, you can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. For a full list of episodes, head on over to cbia.com.